A routine hike turns into a life-threatening isolation after a chain of small choices and tiny moments that never felt dangerous at first. It began with a morning that looked harmless. The sky was clear. The trail was familiar. She had walked it before and never once felt uneasy about going out alone. The weather report promised stable conditions. Nothing hinted at trouble. She set out with confidence, thinking the route would be the same as always, a few hours of steady walking, maybe a photo or two, and then back home before the afternoon heat peaked. She had water, a light pack, and a plan that felt simple. The first shift came when she stepped off the main path to chase a better view. It was a small decision, the kind everyone makes on a hike. She wanted a cleaner angle for a picture. She wanted to see the ridge from a slightly higher point. It did not feel reckless. The ground looked firm. The slope looked manageable. She took a few steps, then a few more, following the curve of the land without checking how far she had drifted. By the time she realized how much ground she had covered, the original trail was no longer in sight. She turned to find it and saw only desert stretching in every direction. Still, she stayed calm. People lose trails all the time. Most of them find their way back with a little patience. She scanned the horizon for familiar shapes. She tried to retrace her steps. She tried to remember the angle of the ridge and the exact direction she had come from. The problem was the sameness of the terrain. Every mound of sand looked like the one before it. Every rock formation seemed to repeat itself. She walked to what she thought was the right spot, only to discover it led her deeper into open country. The heat picked up fast. Morning warmth shifted to harsh dryness, the kind that drains strength without warning. She took a sip of water, confident she would be back on track soon. She kept moving, telling herself the trail had to be close. But the more she searched, the more the land stretched. She checked her phone and found no signal. She checked her pack and realized she had brought less water than she should have because she expected to be out for a short time. That small oversight began to feel heavier with every passing minute. What started as a routine hike grew into something far more serious once the sun rose high. The ground shimmered. Her shadows shortened. She felt sweat evaporate instantly. She began choosing her steps more carefully, not out of fear, but out of growing awareness. The desert is quiet until it is not. Her breathing sounded louder. Her heartbeat felt steady but strong. She paused often to look around, trying to find any sign of direction. There was none. She tried climbing a small rise, hoping the height would reveal a landmark. At the top, she saw only miles of empty sand. No footprints behind her. No clear path ahead. The realization hit in pieces rather than all at once. She was not just off the trail. She was nowhere near anything familiar. Every choice she made to correct her course only pushed her farther out. The landscape worked like a maze without walls, tricking her sense of distance and direction. She weighed her options. Standing still felt risky because she did not know if anyone was searching yet. Moving felt risky because she might walk herself into deeper trouble. She tried to pick a single direction and commit to it, hoping consistency would pay off. The heat pushed back. Her water level dropped faster than she expected. Each sip became a negotiation. Drink too much, and she would run dry. Drink too little, and the dizziness would come. Her thoughts sharpened. Discomfort turned into concern. Concern moved closer to fear, though she fought it. She kept telling herself she was capable. She had handled difficult situations before. But the desert is different. It does not give many second chances. She felt the first signs of fatigue from dehydration, light pressure in her temples, a dry taste she could not shake, a sense that her body was working harder than normal to stay balanced. Hours passed without progress. The sun marked time in a slow, relentless arc. She stopped trying to figure out how she got lost and focused instead on how to make it through the next hour. She looked for shade, found none. She checked her pack again, even though she knew what was in it. She listened for anything that might signal life. Wind, a distant engine, a voice. There was only silence. That silence told her she had moved far beyond where anyone would think to look. What began as a simple morning walk had shifted into a situation she never imagined. A routine hike, the kind she had always enjoyed, had become isolation in one of the harshest places a person can stand. Heat, dehydration, and panic close and fast once the desert decides to show its real face. At first, the warmth feels manageable, even familiar, the kind of dry heat you expect on a midday hike. But as the sun climbs higher, the temperature stops behaving like something natural. It becomes a weight. It presses down on her shoulders, seeps through her clothes, and crawls across her skin until every movement feels heavier than it should. She can feel the shift, subtle at first, then steady, then punishing. The air seems to stand still. Even breathing feels slower. She tries to ration her water, counting each sip instead of drinking for comfort. The bottle feels lighter every time she lifts it. She tilts it just enough to wet her lips, but the relief fades as soon as it comes. Her mouth dries again instantly. Her tongue feels rough. The back of her throat starts to tighten with each swallow. The heat works fast, draining her without giving anything back. Her body asks for more water than she can give it. She tries to ignore the warning signs building inside her. Her headache thickens. Her hands feel warm. Her legs start to lose rhythm. She wipes sweat from her forehead and realizes her skin is already drying the moment she touches it. That scares her. Sweat is supposed to cool you. When sweat evaporates too fast to help, it means the heat is winning. She slows her steps, but slowing does not fix much. The sun is still above her, glaring down without mercy. She tries to find shade again, even knowing there is none. The desert offers no shelter, no breaks, no pauses. It is a place where every exposed minute works against you. Her breathing changes. It grows shallow, not because she is tired, but because her body is trying to conserve moisture. She feels her pulse in her neck, steady but stronger than normal. She notices her thoughts getting louder, quicker, sharper. She starts checking her surroundings more often, not because it helps, but because panic wants something to do. She keeps telling herself not to panic, which only shows how close it is. Panic always waits for moments like this, when the world goes still and the body starts to fail its own expectations. The pressure in her head rises with the heat. Her vision stays clear, but every now and then the horizon wavers in a thin shimmer. She blinks it away, pretending it is just light. She knows better. She knows dehydration creates illusions. She knows it can turn simple shapes into threats. She feels her heart thumping harder than the moment deserves. She tries to breathe deeper. The air feels too hot to hold. She tries to remember the safety tips she has read over the years. Conserve water. Stay calm. Look for high ground. Keep your pace slow. But advice like that feels thin once you are actually trapped in the heat. Her body wants shade. Her brain wants direction. She has neither. She moves anyway because stopping feels like giving up. Each step sends a pulse through her legs. Her shoes are hot from the ground. The sand reflects heat back up like an oven. She adjusts her pack and keeps walking. Dehydration settles in quietly before it hits her hard. Her limbs feel heavier. Her thoughts start to drift. She has to remind herself what she is doing. She has to pull her focus back every few minutes. The desert starts to feel bigger, wider, louder in its silence. She tries again to find footprints behind her, but the wind has erased them. She tries to trace the sun's position to guess direction, but it only tells her she is running out of time. She stops for a moment, hands on her knees, trying to steady her breath. She takes another sip, even though the bottle is almost half empty and the day is far from over. The water is warm now. It does not taste like relief. It tastes like a reminder that she will run out soon. Her mind circles the same thought again and again. She needs help. She needs someone to know she is out here. She checks her phone despite knowing it will show nothing. No bars. No signal. No chance of calling out. Her shoulders tense. Panic pushes closer. It whispers every worst-case scenario in a quiet, steady voice. She tells herself to stay present. She tries to count her steps. She tries to ground herself by naming things she sees, a trick she picked up years ago for anxiety. Sand, sky, rock, heat, horizon. Her voice cracks on the last one. She swallows and tastes dust. She presses her lips together to keep them from drying more. The day feels endless. The heat feels personal. She keeps moving because stopping feels worse. She knows she is losing energy faster than she can afford. She knows the desert is stripping her down piece by piece. And she knows the line between fear and panic is growing thinner with every minute she spends under the blazing sun. Her fight to stay calm becomes her only lifeline once she realizes that panic will drain her faster than the heat ever could. She tells herself to breathe slow and steady, even though her chest keeps tightening. Every instinct inside her wants to rush, to move fast, to claw her way out of the situation. But she knows fast decisions in the desert lead nowhere good. She forces herself to slow down, to take long breaths that feel too warm to help. She counts each inhale in her head, something she learned long before this day, something simple enough to hang on to when everything else feels unstable. The silence around her grows heavier. It is not peaceful. It is the kind of silence that reminds her she is alone out here, that no footsteps will suddenly approach from behind, that no voices will call her name from a distance. She keeps scanning the horizon even though it gives her nothing. She tries to walk in a straight line, picking a landmark and heading toward it. But the heat bends the air. The landmark shifts. Her confidence slips. She stops again and steadies herself, whispering small instructions like they are commands. One step, another. Keep your mind clear. She thinks about the last time she felt truly afraid and how she made it through by doing one thing at a time. That memory becomes something she leans on. Fear is familiar. This place is not. But fear has rules. Fear can be managed. She tells herself that over and over. She will not let her mind spiral. She will not let the rising dread bury her. She forces her thoughts into a straight line, even though they want to scatter in every direction. Her body keeps sending warnings she tries to ignore. Her legs feel unsteady. Her shoulders ache from her pack. Her throat burns. She feels her heartbeat in her ears now. She knows dehydration can fog the mind, twist thoughts, make the world look different than it is. She double-checks everything she sees. She stares at the ground to make sure it is solid. She blinks away the wavering shapes in the distance. She talks to herself quietly, just enough to hear a voice, even if it is her own. Anything to keep her mind sharp. She pauses under the slightest bit of shade cast by a rock barely tall enough to matter. She crouches, not fully sitting, because she knows the longer she rests, the harder it will be to stand again. She wipes her face with the back of her hand. Her skin feels hot. Her fingers feel stiff. She closes her eyes for a moment and tells herself this is still manageable. She is not lost forever. She is just lost right now. There is a difference. She repeats that difference because clinging to it keeps her from unraveling. She tries to think about what she can control. She can control her pace. She can control her breaths. She can control her decisions. She can decide not to waste energy on fear. She can decide not to let her imagination take over. She focuses on small actions. Adjust her pack. Check her water. Look for the slightest sign of direction. Move forward. Repeat. She breaks the entire desert into steps she can handle, even if it feels like lying to herself. Her mind wants to drift toward worst-case scenarios. It tries to picture nightfall. It tries to imagine what will happen when her water runs out. She cuts those thoughts off before they grow. She knows how fear works. It feeds on what-ifs. She sticks to what is. She is still walking. She still has water. She is still thinking clearly enough to make choices. As long as those things are true, panic does not get to win. She remembers advice she once read about surviving harsh environments. Your mind is your strongest tool. If your mind goes, everything goes. That line circles in her thoughts and steadies her. She grips it the way a drowning person might grip a rope. She reminds herself that people survive harder things than this. People get found. People make it out. She refuses to believe she is the exception. When her legs wobble, she stops and breathes. When her thoughts slip, she pulls them back. When fear tries to rise, she meets it with stubbornness. She knows she will not outmuscle the desert. She can only outthink it. So she keeps her focus tight and pointed. She listens to her body without letting it dictate her fate. She walks slower but steadier. She keeps her stride measured. She pays attention to anything that might help her. A distant ridge, a patch of firmer ground, a change in wind. Every detail becomes something she can use. The heat keeps pressing in, trying to break her resolve. The dryness stings her throat. Her pulse stays high. Her body keeps asking her to rest, to give up, to surrender to exhaustion. She refuses. She keeps pushing her mind forward, step by step, inch by inch, knowing that staying calm is the thin line holding everything together. A faint signal catches a SEAL crew's attention long before anyone realizes how much it matters. Inside the helicopter, the crew is running a routine sweep, the kind they have done countless times. The desert below looks empty, harsh, and endless, the kind of terrain where signals usually come from equipment glitches, stray reflections, or old transmissions bouncing off the rocks. When the blip appears on the screen, it is so faint that one of the crew members almost dismisses it. He taps the monitor, thinking it might be interference. The blip stays. It is small, irregular, not strong enough to match standard beacons. Still, it is there. The crew exchanges quick looks, not alarmed but curious. They know the region. They know the patterns. This signal does not fit any of them. It flickers, drops, resurges. Not clean. Not steady. Not something they can identify at a glance. One of them leans closer, narrowing his eyes. He adjusts the frequency range. The signal sharpens for a moment, then fades again. That moment is enough to make them pause. They are trained to question the things that do not make sense. A faint signal in a place where no one is supposed to be is exactly the kind of detail they are taught to notice. The pilot keeps the helicopter on its route, but the atmosphere inside shifts. What started as a routine sweep now carries a thread of possibility, thin but worth tugging. Someone out there might need help. Someone out there might be alive. The crew calls it in, not as an emergency, but as an anomaly worth noting. The base responds with the same caution. Signals happen. Heat can distort readings. The desert is full of tricks. But the crew cannot ignore the tug in their instincts. They have seen enough real emergencies to recognize the early signs, and something about this one feels wrong in a quiet, persistent way. They circle back. The pilot banks the helicopter slightly, bringing them over the same stretch of land where the faint blip first appeared. The crew member monitoring the screen watches closely. The signal returns. Weak, unstable, but real. He marks the coordinates. The others glance out the windows, even though they know they will not see anything from this height. The desert hides people well, but it does not hide signals. The crew begins discussing possibilities. Maybe a hiker wandered off course. Maybe someone broke down far from the main routes. Maybe a device malfunctioned. Maybe it is nothing. But they cannot shake the sense that nothing feels unlikely. Signals do not appear at random. Someone, somewhere, sent that blip, even if they did not mean to. They shift into a more focused mode. Voices lower. Movements get tighter. The pilot adjusts their path. The crew member refining the readings keeps working the dials, trying to pull more information from the faint transmission. He knows if he can strengthen it even slightly, it will tell them whether they need to escalate. He catches another spike, this one sharper. Short, but unmistakable. The room goes still for half a second. That is all it takes. The pilot changes direction fully now, committing to the sweep. They widen the search pattern, watching for any sign the signal might correlate with ground movement or reflect off something human-made. The helicopter hum grows louder as they drop to a lower altitude. Inside, the crew moves with a rhythm they know well. One watches the screen. One scans the terrain through binoculars. One checks mapping overlays. The pilot holds steady through the shifting air currents. Nobody says the word rescue. It feels premature, but the idea hangs there anyway, unspoken but growing. They know time matters. If someone is out there, they will not last long in the heat. The desert drains strength faster than most people expect. Even strong hikers crumble after hours in the sun without water. The crew does not know yet if the signal came from a person, but they act as if it did, because the cost of assuming otherwise is too high. The blip appears again, weaker this time, as though whatever created it is losing power. The crew tightens their focus. They adjust the equipment. They lean into their instincts. They trust the training that tells them faint does not mean unimportant. Faint often means urgent. Faint means someone is close to running out of time. The helicopter makes another slow arc over the desert. The crew listens to static and watches for movement. The pilot steadies the craft as the sunlight reflects off the sand, creating bright flashes that make searching even harder. But they stay locked in. Something is out there. Something tried to reach the world in the smallest way possible, and they are not about to ignore it. The faint signal keeps flickering, a whisper across the equipment, and the crew feels the shift from curiosity to responsibility. They know they are following a thread that might lead nowhere, but they also know threads like this have led to lives saved before. They keep following it, steady and focused, determined to see where it leads. A risky helicopter search begins over open desert the moment the SEAL crew decides the faint signal is worth chasing. The pilot steadies the aircraft as they commit to a coordinated sweep, dropping to an altitude that makes flying more dangerous but searching more effective. The rotor wash kicks up, sand in long swirling trails beneath them. The heat rising from the ground makes the air unstable, creating pockets of turbulence that jar the cabin every few seconds. Nobody complains. This is the kind of risk they accept without hesitation when the possibility of a stranded person enters the picture. The crew spreads out into their roles with practiced precision. One manages the sensors, watching every flicker of the weak signal across the screen. Another tracks navigation, marking areas they have covered and identifying where the next sweep should run. The pilot keeps a tight grip on the controls, trimming and adjusting constantly as the desert winds push back. The crew chief moves from window to window, scanning the terrain for anything that does not match the natural flow of sand and rock. The desert below stretches endlessly. From above it looks smooth at first, but up close it becomes a patchwork of ridges, dips, glare, and shadow. Anyone on foot would be almost invisible, especially without movement. The sun's reflection blinds them in short flashes, and the shifting air bends shapes in ways that trick even experienced eyes. They know this. They know searching by air in these conditions is not straightforward. They also know that hesitation out here can cost a life. The pilot banks left, then straightens. The crew follows the faint signal pattern, which keeps drifting in and out like a radio half drowned in static. It is not enough to pinpoint an exact location. It is barely enough to justify the fuel they are burning. But every time it flickers back, even for a fraction of a second, it keeps them moving. Signals like this do not cling to nothing. Something created it. They need to find that something before the sun drops too low or the heat drains the last bit of strength from whoever is out there. The crew chief spots something first. Not a person, not movement, just a break in the pattern of the sand, a shape that does not fully belong, barely noticeable unless you know the terrain well. He calls it out calmly, knowing that false alarms happen all the time. The pilot swings the helicopter toward the area with a slow, controlled curve. They hover lower, close enough to feel the sand blasting upward from the rotor wash. The shape below turns out to be a rock formation. Nothing more. They keep going. Every minute they spend flying low increases the risks. The uneven ground below sends bursts of hot air upward, throwing the helicopter into small jolts that require immediate correction. The engine readings shift under the strain of the heat. The pilot monitors everything, calculating how long they can safely stay in this pattern. The crew knows the limits, but none of them voice concern yet. They will push it as far as protocol allows. Another pass. Another flicker on the monitor. This one steadier than the previous few. The crew member managing the sensors leans closer, narrowing the search range, tightening the grid. He adjusts the filters, trying to strip out interference caused by the heat rising from the desert floor. For a moment, the signal strengthens enough to give them a rough direction. It is not precise, but it is something they can chase with intention instead of guesswork. The pilot shifts course again. The helicopter dips lower. The crew braces as turbulence shakes them harder this time. They push through it. They keep scanning. The desert continues its quiet resistance, offering no obvious sign of life. But the signal keeps pulling them forward like a faint voice calling through layers of dust and heat. They know the odds. They know how many searches end without finding anyone. They also know the kind of injuries dehydration can create, how quickly a person can fall unconscious, how fast the desert can turn a simple mistake into a fatal one. That knowledge fuels them more than fear. It keeps them sharp. It keeps them moving even when the rational part of their minds says the signal might lead to nothing. Another sweep. Another adjustment. Another surge of heat buffeting the aircraft. The crew stays locked in, every pair of eyes trained on the ground or the equipment. They trust their instincts as much as their training, and those instincts tell them they are close to something that needs them. In the cockpit, the pilot steadies the helicopter for yet another low pass. Knowing each one increases the danger, but also knowing there is no other choice if they want even a chance of finding who might be calling out through that fading signal. A near impossible rescue ends in a second chance at life, once the SEAL crew commits fully to dropping lower, pushing the helicopter into a zone where skill matters more than comfort. The faint signal they have been tracking continues to pulse in uneven waves, barely enough to guide them, but just strong enough to insist they do not turn back. The pilot brings the aircraft down to an altitude normally reserved for extraction, not search. The rotors roar louder. The dust rises in thick spirals. The desert reacts like a living thing, fighting their presence. The crew does not slow. They know this is the point where hesitation could erase everything. The crew chief leans out the open side door, secured by his harness, scanning the ground with sharp precision. His eyes jump from ridge to ridge, from shadow to glare, looking for the smallest detail out of place. Footprints. A color that does not belong. Movement. Fabric. Anything. The heat rising from the sand keeps bending the air, making shapes twist and stretch. It is easy to mistake nothing for something. It is even easier to miss the real thing entirely. Still he watches with relentless focus, blocking out the wind and noise. Inside, the sensor operator calls out that the signal just spiked again. It is not strong, but it is clearer. The moment he says it, the atmosphere in the helicopter shifts. The crew moves faster. The pilot veers toward the coordinates, reading the terrain ahead and deciding where he can safely lower the aircraft without slamming into a sudden downdraft. He knows this part of the job carries the real danger. Flying low in desert heat is a constant negotiation with invisible forces. As they approach the new coordinates, the sensor blip stabilizes for the first time. The crew locks in. The crew chief shifts angles, scanning harder. The helicopter slows, hovering just above the threshold where sand starts blasting upward. Through the haze, he spots something small. He does not call it a person yet. From the air, everything looks like a trick. But he sees a shape that does not move like rock. It does not blend like sand. It looks like fabric. Maybe clothing. Maybe a backpack. He calls it out with controlled urgency. The pilot adjusts instantly, bringing them closer. The other crew members lean toward their windows. The shape becomes clearer. A person lying on the desert floor, still, barely visible under the harsh glare. The crew does not cheer or shout. They move into protocol with cold precision. The pilot has to land fast but safely. The ground below is uneven. The heat lift is brutal. The air keeps buckling under the blades. He steadies the aircraft against all of it. The landing is rough but controlled. The moment the skids touch sand, the crew chief jumps out, ducking under the rotors. The heat outside is far worse than it looked from the air, but he does not slow. He runs toward the figure. He kneels beside her and calls out, checking for any response. At first she does not move. Her skin is pale and dry. Her breathing is faint. He feels a pulse only after a few seconds, and even then it is weak and thready. She is alive, but the desert has taken nearly everything from her. He radios the others, and they move with urgency sharpened by relief. 2 crew members rush from the helicopter carrying medical gear. They check her vitals, shield her from the sun, and start the initial steps to stabilize someone suffering from severe heat exposure and dehydration. One gives her a measured amount of water, careful not to overwhelm her system. Another prepares in 4. Their voices stay steady, calm, and direct. The pilot keeps the helicopter steady on the uneven ground, watching the gauges and the horizon. He knows they cannot stay long. The heat threatens the aircraft. The conditions are unstable. Once she is secured on the stretcher and lifted into the cabin, he prepares for takeoff. The crew gets inside quickly, strapping her in and checking her breathing again. The rotor wash kicks up another wave of sand as the helicopter lifts off, carrying her away from the place where she nearly disappeared from the world. Inside, the crew keeps working. They cool her skin. They monitor her pulse. Her eyelids flicker once, a sign that her body is trying to come back. The crew does not relax. They stay focused, managing every detail, knowing she is not safe yet. But she is no longer alone on the desert floor. She is no longer fading under the sun with no chance of escape. She is airborne, in the hands of people who refuse to ignore a whisper of a signal that most would have dismissed without a second thought.